lap of the race. Second race of the season. Who's in the lead? It's Oscar Piastri who gets past, but Lundgaard's going to risk it, and that will be tight on the curb. How have they managed to get through there? Oscar Piastri takes the lead.
From F2 champion to reserve Alpine driver and potentially never racing in Formula 1, Oscar Piastri is a fascinating character. The young Australian has faced a mixture of criticism and success, but his journey from Melbourne to Formula 1 might shock you. So, here's the truth about Oscar Piastri. Whether you're a hardcore F1 fan or simply a casual spectator of the sport, the name Oscar Piastri is something you must have heard a couple of times. But who is the newcomer setting the F1 grid ablaze? Well, Piastri was born in 2001 to parents Chris and Nicole in Melbourne, Australia. He would go on to attend Haileybury College, Melbourne, before receiving a scholarship from Haileybury and Imperial Service College in England as a boarding student. But it was much earlier than this when his love and passion for the sport of motor racing first appeared. At the tender age of 9, the young Piastri developed a love for racing and would enter remote-controlled racing competitions much like Hamilton had done in his earlier years. His career in RC racing would propel him onto the karting scene in late 2011, where he would spend 5 years becoming a professional karting racer and eventually found himself driving for Ricky Flynn Motorsport in 2015. This would give him the opportunity to move to the United Kingdom, where his karting career continued, and he finished 6th in the 2016 World Championship held in Bahrain. But what many people might not know is that Oscar Piastri's father Chris is the founder and owner of the Australian company HP Tuners, which would come to play a significant role in helping the youngster break into one of the most expensive sports in the world. Many of you probably remember the Lewis Hamilton quote suggesting Formula 1 is nothing more than a billionaire boys' club. In layman's terms, it simply means that it can be very expensive for anyone to enter the sport. For Piastri, the fact that his father's company was successful made this a hell of a lot easier. You see, Oscar moved up to Formula 4 in 2016 and in the process landed his first sponsorship in HP Tuners. The HP Tuners logo played a prominent role in his career, being featured on his car and suit in the GP3 series, F3 and later in F2. However, Piastri had a natural talent for driving, and this is one thing that no one could take away. During his single-seater debut in selected rounds of the Formula 4 UAE Championship, Piastri claimed 2 podiums and finished 6th in the championship with his team Dragon F4. Later, Piastri would sign for TRS Ardent Junior Racing Team's lineup for the British F4 Championship in 2017. Thanks to his skill, Piastri won 6 races and claimed 6 pole positions, finishing as eventual runner-up to Jamie Caroline. But even though he had significant success as a youth driver, the real Oscar Piastri never truly came out until he was racing in Formula 3. You see, Formula 3 is the entry to the bigger leagues, and it is here where you truly get some attention. A couple of years of Formula 4 and Formula Renault gave the young Australian plenty of confidence and a bit of a reputation. He was snapped up by arguably the most famous team in F3, which is Prema Racing, in October of 2019, with aims to race in 2020, and would be paired alongside Logan Sargent and Frederick Vesti. In his debut race at the Red Bull Ring in Austria, Piastri entered the grid from 3rd, and hopes were already high for the Australian to perhaps become the next Mark Webber or Daniel Ricciardo. Once the lights went out, it was a bit of pandemonium as Piastri made contact with pole sitter Sebastian Fernandez at turn 1, but emerged from the incident without any damage. In fact, his legacy would be born from this race, as he went on to take the victory on debut, and this was followed by 3 consecutive second-place finishes in the next few races. The rest of his Formula 3 season was successful, leading to a battle for the championship between Piastri, Sargent and Pourchaire. It would eventually be Piastri emerging winning the championship by finishing 7th in the final race of the season, while both his rivals failed to score. But this was only the beginning, and the true attention came about when Piastri moved up to Formula 2 the following season. In fact, this is the breeding ground for future F1 drivers, with the likes of Russell, Norris and Stroll among the recent drivers to come out of F2. What many people didn't know is that Piastri actually replaced Mick Schumacher in the Prema Racing Formula 2 car, with Robert Schwartzman being his partner for the team. It was also here that Piastri became part of the Alpine Academy, which aimed to groom the young rookie to eventually take over from Fernando Alonso in the Renault-powered car. But first, Piastri had to deal with a Formula 2 season, and thanks to his impressive skill, he won the final 4 races of the season, totaling 6 victories by the end of the year, and lifting the championship by the end of it all. This would solidify Piastri in the sport, and he would join the rare company of only a handful of drivers to win F2 or GP2 in their rookie season. Among these drivers are Lewis Hamilton, Nico Rosberg, Nico Hülkenberg, Charles Leclerc and George Russell, with all these drivers going on to accomplish big things in their F1 careers. But this is where things almost came to a halt for the Australian rookie sensation, and after winning the Formula 2 Series Championship, the only next step is to move into Formula 1. However, Formula 1 only features 10 teams with 20 seats available on the grid. Piastri did in fact test numerous cars for the Renault Academy at the time, but this was where it ended, and after winning the F2 Championship in 2021, the Australian was left with a reserve driver spot for Alpine and hopes of Alonso retiring to open up a seat. Ocon, who was the other Alpine driver, was already tied to a long-term contract. So how did Piastri make it into Formula 1 when left in a position where money didn't matter? Coming into Formula 1 after such success made Piastri the new golden boy on the block. In fact, many believed he would follow in the footsteps of Leclerc or perhaps even Max Verstappen, but being demoted to a rookie driver was the best Piastri could manage in a season where all the seats on the grid had been filled. For the 2022 season, he was constantly testing and honing his skills during weekends when testing cars were available for the Alpine team. But thanks to an agreement with McLaren, which Alpine would later come to regret, he was also made available as an Alpine reserve driver. Behind the scenes, you see, McLaren was struggling, and with Ricciardo struggling to keep up with teammate Norris, replacing the veteran Aussie was on the cards. McLaren team principal Andreas Seidel would later confirm that private testing at Circuit Paul Ricard was held for Piastri in the McLaren, and the team was impressed. But a few months prior, the rumor mill started turning, and Piastri, who didn't have a clear future, was becoming vocally frustrated with Alpine, who had considered keeping Alonso on board and leaving Piastri once again without a seat. Fortunately, he was to be loaned out to Williams for the 2023 season, which would have given him time and an opportunity to follow in the footsteps of Russell. But in August of the same year, news broke that Alonso was to replace Vettel at Aston Martin, opening up a seat in the French outfit. In fact, Alpine turned to X, formerly Twitter, to announce that Piastri was elevated to an Alpine seat. Keen-eye observers noted that during the press release there were no quotes from Piastri himself, which created plenty of confusion inside the paddock. But just a few hours later, Piastri himself took to X, where he surprisingly rejected the Alpine announcement, stating that he had not signed a contract with the French outfit. This came as a massive surprise to everyone. It was later revealed that the Australian was negotiating with McLaren, as his contract with Alpine had ended, but this was still only as a reserve driver, with negotiations between McLaren and Ricciardo still ongoing. Both Alpine and Piastri accused each other of not being loyal and cited a breakdown in trust as the reason for moving away from one another. But things were going from bad to great for the Aussie, as McLaren managed to reach an agreement with Ricciardo, opening up a seat for the 2023 season, in which Piastri would partner Lando Norris. Here things still didn't go as planned, as Piastri was left with a subpar car and was hardly able to break into the points. Whenever he was on par with scoring points, bad luck would come his way, a pattern that seemed like it would continue all year until the British Grand Prix. With a solid upgrade package, Piastri finished 4th at Silverstone, followed by a 5th position at the Hungaroring and heading into the summer break with a 6th position at Spa. He also led his first F1 race at Spa, jumping pole sitter Verstappen when the light went out. After the summer break, McLaren was on fire, with both cars now continuously competing for the podium and eventually finding themselves embroiled in a fight with Mercedes, Ferrari and Aston Martin. Piastri finished on the podium twice, and many believe that he could have won if it wasn't for a few things that didn't go his way. Topping all this off, The Australian received a contract extension, solidifying his seat at least until 2026. But his career is marred by controversy, and while many people might love the young Piastri, others see his lack of loyalty to the Alpine Driver Academy as somewhat of a stain in his career. Now, even though this blemish will be remembered, there's no doubt that Piastri is one of the best current drivers in the grid, and should McLaren continue their development, he could perhaps challenge the Red Bulls. But do you think his lack of loyalty would count against him? And does he have a solid future in the sport? Make sure to drop a comment below.